know that we're in Germany today.
Yes.
And today's tasting, because we're restricted by the state of New Jersey to 4 samples, 4 offerings, we decided that it would be most interesting just to pour dry wine, focus wine. Not because dry wine is better than sweet wine. In fact, people who tell me they only like dry wine, I have poured for them flopping sweet, thick, that you could spread on toast, Auslesen, and they are so amazed they never tasted anything, and they're so compelled, and how can we get more of this? What can we do? Because they always make the assumption, having tasted some garbage wine once, that was sweet and terrible, that sweet means terrible. And it doesn't. Terrible is terrible. But there are, among the greatest wines in the world are powerfully sweet wines. And that it's a serious misperception. However, in the case of Riesling, it can be very interesting to consider the stone that the vines grow in, the rock, the soil, and how it's so transparently expressed. And it is very transparently expressed in dry wine. So this is that's what we decided, given only 4, the possibility of 4 wines is dry wine. But it's important. It's not because it's better wine. It just happens to be dry wine. So this wine comes from Hügelland. Hügelland is right here. It's this little district around Worms and outside, here in the Rheinhessen. And it's an area underlying, or the bedrock underlying the soil is limestone, like Burgundy. Very much like Burgundy. In fact, in some vineyards you have red and white limestone in certain sections, the way you do in Chambon-Musigny, for example. You have red limestone side and white limestone side. It's made by the 7th generation of a family that bought one of the great historically brilliant, prestigious vineyards in the area called the Hubacher in 1789. They came from Switzerland. And they were able to retain ownership and continuously produce wine there since then. Even through the period in which Napoleon came through, after the French Revolution. There were other magnificent, very prestigious vineyards, including Kirchspiel and Moorstein and Abzerd, which were, Abzerd, for example, all of the production of Abzerd was reserved for the Archbishop Elector of Worms. They were such prestigious wines. But they were completely forgotten because when Napoleon came through, he ripped out all the vines and he planted wheat because he had the experience of it's much easier to operate an army with bread than with wine. And so it was planted with wheat. So several generations forgot where these great vineyards were located. But in the mid-1980s, Klaus Peter's father, who was a amateur primary document research historian, and his wife, Klaus Peter's mother, who was a geologist, decided to embark on the rediscovery of the location of these places, and were able, after lots and lots of research and patience, and thousands of core samples taken in the district, were able to locate the Moorstein, the Kirchspiel, the Abzerd, and also discreetly buy up a little piece of wheat field here, a little piece of Liebfraumilch, a Müller-Thurgau vineyard there that nobody really cared about, and a little of this. And over the course of the decade between the mid-80s to the mid-90s, assembled a brilliant estate, including those tremendous vineyards that didn't really exist. I mean, that nobody cared about, nobody knew or remembered. And Klaus Peter came along in 2001, and he happens coincidentally, it's a lot of happy coincidences in this area, happens to be a very sensitive grower and winemaker, and is now producing what most wine freaks, most Riesling freaks, as they count themselves, consider maybe the top producer in Germany. And he would happily deflect all the glory to his mother, who died very young, without which it wouldn't exist. It just wouldn't exist without finding these places. So here your limestone. And here where limestone and quartzite. And here we're Hügelland, and this wine comes from Rheingau, which is this crescent arc of that the river makes on a map as it flows between Mainz and Bingen. And so the vineyards are on the right bank of the Rhine here, where it's typically, in some parts it's a steep slope of slate, but here in Estrich is much more gradual. It's limestone, sort of limestone quartzite, with the advantage of the moderating influence of the wide Rhine there. And you'll see what Rheingau means vis-a-vis Hügelland. It's quite different. This is another little entry-level wine made by one of the most obsessive, that's what I put it, practitioners of biodynamics in Germany. So I don't know if you ever heard a story about biodynamics, but it's based on a series of lectures that was given by Rudolf Steiner, whom you may know as the founder of the Waldorf schools in the 1920s, or may not. It's kind of arcane. But he gave a series of lectures about folkloric agricultural practices, and it became codified into this discipline, biodynamics, in which there's first a belief in the necessary interdependence of the forces of life and cosmos and Earth. Also the idea that, so what happens, they consult the phases of the moon, positions of the planets for various activities, both in the vineyard and the cellar. And also the belief that the farm is a self-contained living entity. So nothing can come in that didn't grow there. You can't add things, sugar, for example, that came from the islands or something, other kinds of things. And it also involves preparations, homeopathy. And there's one that I remember experiencing here. I watched my friend in Alsace make the preparation, do the stirring where the cosmic energy comes in, as the vortex created and so on. Seriously. But here I was invited to visit the place where they actually bury the cow horns that are packed with manure. They're buried for 6 lunar cycles, where the manure ferments in the cow horns. They're exhumed, and that's what's used in the barrel of water that is stirred in 2 directions, at which change of direction the vortex gathers the cosmic energy. But I was invited to visit where they bury them, where they had installed a park bench, because it's very efficacious to go and visit the cow horns. The dog came along, Akina, the black Labrador. He would sit too, and the tail would wag as the cosmic energy was being infused in the thing. And you know, when we can you know, laugh about how can it work or what does it mean, except that the accurate practice of biodynamics is so detailed, so labor-intensive, so difficult to do that it attracts obsessive perfectionists who would otherwise be doing very careful, detailed work in any case. And it involves good work as well as the hokey preparations, if I may, and I don't mean to be irreverent because it's not my place. I can't explain why the wines are typically very interesting, except that the people doing it are really passionate, detail-oriented, careful producers. But what's revealed is the dramatic difference in the soil origin of the 2 wines. There's a pungency and a fullness that here is a purity and a crisp, clean, and it's this limestone pushing the fruit forward, and here it's quartzite and limestone and loam and broad, full, pungent kind of wine. The British used to call these wines hock. That was a classic one. You don't have a great service. This is Keller's little entry one. So then we go, if we go here to number 3 and 4, this is not current. If we go to number 3 and 4, we come to wines from the same producer. Schonleber. Schonleber is located here in the Nahe. And you see this, that's how it's spelled. The Nahe is the name of this little river that flows into the Rhine here at Bingen. And so it's interesting. You imagine wine regions named for rivers like Rhine or Mosel, or you imagine the vineyard sloping like that, sort of down to the river, with a mirror image slope on the opposite side. Does that make sense? You ever seen photos or traveled in wine country there? And the pine forest or whatever, the scrub or whatever is growing on the other side, that slope protects your vineyard from weather. It's also, you know, you have the exposure, but also, well, this is a very different kind of place. It's a slope actually a little steeper than that one in the photograph, but it falls down onto a plain. So instead of having any mirror image, it's exposed to the weather, which the weather happens to be very interesting in the place, because it falls down to a plain here. So this plain, but to the west of the plain is mountains, and the result of this whole gross topography here in Monsinghen, these slopes that go down, is that there's a thermal wind that blows up the slope like crazy. It's 15 degrees warmer than the rest of the air around, and it's blowing at 15 miles an hour. It feels like a blast furnace if you're walking in the vineyard. If you look up, there are hawks. Everybody's up there soaring. If you go down the river towards the Rhine, another village, 2 villages, you can pay 40 euros and get a half-hour ride on a glider. With a glider pilot. It has 2 seats. Good thing, because it has to come down too. It's because of the thermals that are routine there. In fact, one of the 2 vineyards that are blended here, so it's a blend of 2 vineyards. One is Hollenberg, and you see the Grand Cru wine here from Hollenberg. You see it's a bigger bottle and it's embossed, and this is like the Grand Cru, the highest class. But here you see another class here, because both of those vineyards are potentially Grand Cru vineyards. One of them is named Frühlingsplätzchen, which means nice little place to be in the springtime, and it recalls the strategy of the Romans who planted it, that they would look for a hillside, say in March, and it's covered with snow, except for a big amorphously shaped bald spot where the snow melted first in the springtime, and that's where they would plant. So this is mineral from Schonleber. The volume and so on that comes with these very great vineyards. Here you have, frankly, wine from lesser little vineyards, younger vines, and so on. Here you have Cabernet and Spätlese ripeness level in 2 very great vineyards. All the same grape variety, all the same vintage, all within this distance. And what dramatically different wines that you have. So this wine is from one of the 2, the single vineyards. Actually, you have in Hollenberg, you have primarily blue slate. In Frühlingsplätzchen, which is the one which is blended with Hollenberg over here, you have red slate, more red slate. So in terms of the expression of the Hollenberg vis-a-vis Frühlingsplätzchen, wow, it's often more power and pungency of the liquefied slate in Hollenberg and in Frühlingsplätzchen, sometimes, but also a different color of the fruit, redness to the fruit. Somehow, it's actually the wine tastes different, despite that the hillsides are located right next to each other. So this is Hollenberg Großes Gewächs, 2011. This is a year older than the other wines. A wonderful vintage. But this is the highest legal quality of dry wine in Germany, dry Riesling in Germany. You're ready to taste the
I've had that.
Oh, you did. Okay.
I think I went out of order.
What did you do? I don't know. What did you miss one?
No, I think I've caught up. I just went out of order.
This is Großes Gewächs Hollenberg. But I repeat myself, and you may not have heard. I bandy about Großes Gewächs being a translation of Grand Cru. And it is Grand Cru, but it's more than Grand Cru. Because if you're in Burgundy and you have vines in Corton-Charlemagne, you may be an idiot, you may have young vines, and you may be a terrible grower and winemaker, but if you bottle a liquid coming from the grapes that grew in your vineyard in Corton-Charlemagne, on the label you have Grand Cru Corton-Charlemagne. And somebody in a store, someplace that has never heard of you as a grower, may pay $75 a bottle for that wine, or $175 a bottle for that wine, not knowing that it's not really Grand Cru quality. In Germany, you don't just make Grosses Gewächs wine from the vineyard you have that is potentially a Grosses Gewächs vineyard. You first ask the authorities to come and inspect the vines in the year that you announce your intention to make a Grosses Gewächs. They come and inspect the vines and they say, oh yes, you may make a Grosses Gewächs, or you may proceed to the next stage of making a Grosses Gewächs. And then the authorities will come back at each important stage, and ultimately they will taste the wine, and it will then be possible that it will be a Grosses Gewächs. So it's much more regulated, much more. It's a much more reliable indicator of ultra high quality than Grand Cru is in Burgundy, because of all those restrictions. Powerfully concentrated wine, Auslese level, parts of clusters picked for their perfection of each berry on the thing. Yields being very, very small, but concentration and quality very high. And these also, although this particular winemaking has only been practiced for the past 15 years in most of these places. It was practiced for normally they were the greatest wines 100 years ago. So if you look at the wine list of the Titanic, they were older than this, but they were also single vineyard Grand Cru, named this way, that they were simply named Hollenberg, or simply named Rosacker, or simply named Frühlingsplättchen, or simply named Sankt Jost, or Wolfsele. They were routinely listed on the menu at 3 or 4 times the price of Chateau Lafite. And imagine, who were the market? They were the British upper crust, and they had plenty of experience with wines from around the world, and they counted these to be the greatest wines, the greatest natural white wines made anywhere, and were willing to pay the price. The consequence of the disasters of the 20th century on German wine resulted in the common wisdom. Oh, German wine, sweet, cheap. I don't know. It can't be good. But that ultimately these are really inexpensive compared to what they were. Now this wine is a very expensive Grosses Gewächs. It's $90, discounted 10% is $81. But that's, if you compare it to Chateau Lafite, which is $800 a bottle now in a current vintage, and it used to be 2 or 3 times the price, this is really now dramatically especially accessible example of what are really meant the greatest wines possible, wherever you